With the government setting out plans for us all now learning to live with COVID, commuters keen to return to the office are learning the normal service of a pre-pandemic life no longer exists. Over the last few months, rail operators have implemented new timetables in response to fewer passenger numbers and falling revenue, with more than a quarter of trains cut on some lines into the capital. Our political correspondent Simon Harris is at Waterloo. Simon.
Ronke, the number of commuters coming into London by train appears to be between 50% and 60% of what it was 2 years ago. But are there enough trains? The government and the rail industry says yes, they're tailoring supply to meet demand. But talk to passengers on some lines and they'll tell you the gap between trains is longer than it used to be. And if you can get a train, it can often be very crowded. When the 758 to Waterloo arrives in Richmond, the local MP has a good idea what to expect. Sarah Olney is a regular commuter on South Western Railway and has watched the trains get busier as more Londoners go back to work. But she's worried the train companies are sticking with their emergency timetables.
And what I'm really concerned about is that we start to see services return to the level we had before the pandemic. For me, it's really, really important that we have a sustainable train services, that services are available when people need them, and that people are encouraged to use the trains instead of their cars.
For most passengers joining the 758, it was standing room only. Tom works in finance and travels in from Berkshire.
It's just hot. It's just warm. It just feels warm on the trains. I was having to go into the office most of the time during the pandemic anyway, and it was quite nice, and I got a bit used to it. But now it's it's certainly a lot more crowded.
Before coronavirus, travelling to work on crowded trains was simply a fact of life for tens of thousands of people. But working from home has made many question whether they want to do this anymore, and that creates a dilemma for the rail industry. The train companies need passengers to come back in far greater numbers to justify running more trains. But until there are more trains, some commuters may decide to stay away. South Western says COVID has changed everything.
The way people commute and travel has changed significantly. So as an industry, we need to change with that, which means that we need to make sure we provide the right amount of capacity to meet the demand, which at the moment is just under 50% of commuters returning to the network, and we're predicting up to about 60% by the end of the year.
But London's mayor thinks the reduced timetables are a barrier to the capital emerging from the pandemic.
Well, I've been speaking to businesses across our city, including those in the City of London. They're incredibly frustrated by the poor service from those train operating companies from outside London who come in, because what happens is people then prefer to work from home.
But it seems some commuters are prepared to go back to how it used to be, not necessarily out of choice. This was the Waterloo and City line during the morning rush hour. Even with a full service, it was a tight squeeze. The Department for Transport points out that it's spent £14 billion propping up the railways during the pandemic. Its focus now, it says, is on reliable timetables and getting value for money for the taxpayer. It also believes that the post-COVID era is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to make the railways fit for the future, bearing in mind the changes in working practices and the way we commute. The Rail Delivery Group, which represents the train companies, admits there are pinch points. It's those pinch points which are probably most obvious on London commuter lines.
Simon Harris, thank you.
Russian money in the capital is one of the big political arguments this week, which Simon will be talking about on the Late Debate tonight.
As the Prime Minister promises to hobble the Russian economy, what does that mean for the City of London? We'll be discussing the claims that London has become a laundry for dirty Russian money, with the capital's property market providing an easy and lucrative cover for crooked dosh. And should Labour expel 4 London MPs who seem to think NATO is to blame for the invasion? Plus, has London's mayor dug himself into a big hole over a proposed £2 billion tunnel under the Thames? Campaigners are engaged in a week of protests, calling on the mayor to scrap the Silvertown tunnel. On Saturday, they're planning a big demonstration at City Hall. It's the biggest construction project on the Greenwich Peninsula since the Millennium Dome more than 2 decades ago. And like the Dome, it divides opinion. The Silvertown Tunnel is a £2.2 billion river crossing beneath the Thames, designed to act as an overflow for the nearby Blackwall Tunnel.
There are dozens of tricks that transport policy people can play to deal with the problem of congestion. Building a tunnel which sucks up £2 billion when TfL is in the sort of spending crisis that it's in at the moment is crazy.
Sadiq Khan was said to be delighted when the government gave the tunnel the green light in 2018. But the project has increasingly put the mayor on a collision course with environmental campaigners. Jackie Applebee, an East London GP who's a member of the Unite union, is among 100 doctors who earlier today signed a letter calling on the mayor to cancel the tunnel.
Ultimately, the Silvertown Tunnel is going to bring more air pollution from brake dust and from the burning of fossil fuels into East London, which is going to impact negatively on the health of my patients who already suffer disproportionately because they live in a highly polluted area.
But the mayor argues that by ending tailbacks at the Blackwall Tunnel, the Silvertown Tunnel will actually improve air quality. He also believes most environmentalists recognise his green credentials.
They point to the fact that we've reduced by almost half the toxic air in the centre of our city. We've rolled out the ultra-low emission zone so it covers double the size of Paris, and I'm as proud as them are at our achievements over the last 5 years, but there's more to do.
A week ago, the mayor hosted a Clean Air Summit. The government's chief medical officer, Chris Whitty, took part. So too did Rosamond Adu-Kissi-Debrah, whose 9-year-old daughter's death from asthma was blamed on pollution. She supports most of the mayor's air quality policies, but not the tunnel.
I think it should be abolished, but then you wouldn't be surprised, I would say, that anything that creates more air pollution, I'm never going to stand for it, anything. So my stance is very easy.
The London Assembly asked Sadiq Khan to calculate the cost of scrapping the tunnel. He said that was commercially sensitive, but he suggested it would be more than £360 million and mean an even bigger rise in council tax. Simon Harris, ITV News.